भारत माता बुधगीता जयति जयति भारत माता बुधगीता जयति जयति भारत माता बुधगीता निखिलमता वननिगता नत जन सुहिता निखिलमती जयति 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 जयति.
Namaskar and welcome to Namaste 2020. This is the last afternoon midday session that we will be having. This is brought to you by the Center for Soft Power with support from ICCR and S. Vyasa Deemed University. The session we have now is Krida. Krida as in play, fun, games, playground. In the Indian ethos, everything that you look around at actually truly revolves around divinity. Even a game of Kavade reminds you of the Mahabharata. And when you think of the Mahabharata, the person that comes foremost to your mind is Lord Krishna. When I was young, I remember we used to play this game called, it used to be called Kallata. You had, five stones or 8 stones, and then you threw it up and then you brought it down in different combinations. And this led to your motor skills, your eye movements. Everything in our culture has been very well thought out. The Paramapada Shopanapadam, the snake, which is later called Snakes and Ladders, originally had a lot of value systems. If you understand one thing about our culture, there's nothing called moral education. Moral education is not from our original ancient tradition at all. Everything was value-based. Nobody at the end of a chapter told you, okay, so this is the moral from the story. The story was told to you and you learned the values from it. If you got it, well and good. If you didn't, it sunk into you and at some point you would learn it. So today we have these 2 young people and I will allow another youngster to introduce them. And they are doing a phenomenal job of rejuvenating traditional games. There's a lot of math involved in it, and it's all fun-filled, and the boards itself are so beautiful. Those are all works of art. And so I will now hand it over to Arunima to introduce the 2 of them.
Thank you, Akka. Welcome, Sreeranjini. Welcome, Rohan. It's indeed a pleasure to have you with us. A very nice flow also to a session that we had yesterday, which was on sports diplomacy. And this is, I think, a natural continuum when we talk about traditional Indian games. So I'll just introduce both of you quickly for our audience here. Sreeranjini set up Kavade in Bangalore more than a decade ago to bring back the lost charm of ancient games. The quaint store is complemented by Kavade Attic, an engaging space to indulge in and create playtime memories that are far removed from the adulteration of plastic or technology. In a world dominated by digital media, Kavade takes pride in reviving games that are strongly entrenched in culture and tradition. Kavade is Sreeranjini's way of asking people to try the alternative, to unplug, to discover different ways of coming together and staying together. We'll have a glimpse of it today, since we can't come to the Kavade Attic now. And Rohan is a London-based marketing professional and founder of Ishwa Co., a platform paying homage to India's civilizational heritage by showcasing culturally rooted Indian brands and ideas under one curated setting. Having lived, studied, and worked in London for nearly a decade, Rohan has experienced firsthand the nuances of cosmopolitan culture and global marketing trends. He recently started Ishwa as a response to global buyer demand for conscious sourcing, as well as urgent need to revive India's position as an ancient trading nation and cultural superpower. While still in the launch phase, Ishwa curates all aspects of Indian culture on its popular Instagram channel, from traditional board games and handloom weaves to sacred cities and floor art motifs, the aim being to inspire product design and usher authentic Indian culture onto the global mainstream. Definitely check out his Instagram page, guys. Over to you both.
I would be failing in my duty if I don't announce the name of that cute, adorable, sweet little child who sang the invocation for us today. And it was specially sung for us. Her name is Mahalakshmi.
Yes.
Thank you, Arnuma. Thank you, Vijay Lakshmi ji, and good day to everyone. And thanks for having us on this session. I'm really glad to be here. So board games are a complex cultural manifestation that take inspiration from many scientific and artistic disciplines, from mathematics in rules and board design through to painting and decoration, and also sculpture in pieces or boards. In fact, games spread from culture to culture in a way that's almost unparalleled, and that has never been truer in the case of India. They exist at a level that goes beyond religion and politics, and they represent a free means of communication between people that nothing can successfully sort of interrupt. And for me, I think board games are the great unifiers of humankind. And so what Sreeranjini and I have put together is a nice session that's packed with information theory, but also game demonstrations, which I'm personally very excited about. So before we kick off, though, I want to sort of set the scene, and we're going to have a fun quiz slash poll, and hope Zoom supports us with technology. So what you're going to see next is a couple of questions that will pop up on your screen. And all you need to do is select an answer to the question. So here we go. So question number one, which one of these modern board games was not invented in India? Is it A, Ludo, Snakes and Ladders, checkers, or chess? You can see the votes starting to pour in. Let's wait another 5 or 10 seconds. Interesting. Right. So I think most of you got it right. So the correct answer indeed is checkers. Ludo, Snakes and Ladders, and chess. They were all invented in India, and checkers was invented in China. So question number two. How is Mokshapatham also popularly known as? Is it A, Goats and Tigers? Is it Snakes and Ladders? Is it Tic-Tac-Toe? Is it Tom and Jerry? Okay. I think there's enough of you voted there. So I think this was an easy one. I think most of you got it right. So Mokshapatham is actually Snakes and Ladders, and we'll go more deeper into it and its significance, etc. But here is the last question. Which of these games is said to have been played in the Mahabharata? Is it A, Chaucer? Is it B, chess? C, Akshay Tyuta? And D, Snakes and Ladders? I'm almost feeling like Amitabh Bachchan from Gone. But here we go. Okay. Interesting. So this is a little bit of a trick question, and I think most of you said Chaucer, but actually there has been a bit of a research recently, and it actually is Akshadyuta, and which is kind of similar, but not exactly Pachisi or Chaucer. But yeah, I would sort of encourage you to look into this. It's a very interesting research, and that's about it. But yeah, I mean, I think most of y'all are sort of in tune with what board games are, and with that, I'm going to hand over to Sreeranjini, who's going to take you into the evolution of the concept of play. So over to you.
Thank you, and namaste to all of you. Thank you all for joining the Krida Lab. Thank you, Srimati Vijayalakshmi, Srimati Aparna, Arunima, Center for Soft Power, Indic Academy for putting out such a beautiful Namaste 2020. It is my greatest pleasure and privilege to share with all of you, along with Rohan, a topic that is very, very close to my heart. Ancient games and play. It's backed by an implicit trust on the resilience and strength of ancient games. They're simple and rooted in culture and tradition. It's an even bigger joy, let me tell you, to be amid people who are equally interested in a similar thought process. We are all probably pursuing different ways of achieving these objectives. And my belief is that as this movement gathers more momentum, it will become unstoppable. We'll all become unstoppable. And rightly, Rohan said, we've tried to make this a little as engaging as possible, given it's an online forum. We're trying to have some game demos in between. So you might be able to learn a few games today in the 1.5 hours. But the only glitch is that I may not be able to take questions in between to clarify game rules, which we can always do towards the end of the session. I'd now like to start sharing the screen. Just give me a minute. All right. Can you all see the screen now? Think about this. We all probably have memories while we were growing up of incidents from our childhood, maybe collecting seeds, carrying stones, marbles in our pockets, climbing trees, watching leaves float on the river, maybe making paper boats and floating it in the puddles in front of our homes, stealing mangoes from our neighbors' gardens, flying kites, such beautiful memories, which were enjoyable then. And when you think of it today, it definitely brings a smile on each and every one of our faces, right? That's the joy, that's the joyful engagement that we can have with our surroundings and nature, which for me is the essential core bit of play, which is so much a universal feature of our human culture, both past and present. We see it not just in human beings, but when you look across our art and culture, you see gods and goddesses have also reveled in the joy of playing. Be it Krishna Leela, Krishna playing Bugri, Chinidandu, or Shiva Parvati playing a game of dice. We have seen many examples of people enjoying the aspect of play. And also, although we have own artifacts that are available, play artifacts from just 5,000 years back, I feel play predates a large part of when humanity itself came into existence, which makes me think that it basically satisfies some general human needs. Laughter and play are some things that really distinguish us from other creatures, and that is something we have to definitely keep alive. And when you think of folk music, stories, I feel games by themselves are great narrative. Play is a narrative which can give you a lot about how things were in the past, what is it that we could learn from it, just the way music and stories give us those elements. So play is a pastime that every human being has delighted in, regardless of age and then gender. And it transfers us to a time and place which is very different, right? It provides us that bit of laughter, relaxation, which is again distinctive to us. So in that sense, I would say these the play that happened from from the time humanity started till now, it has always given us that space of providing a grounding into our cultures, our belief systems, and giving us that engagement into our surroundings and nature. I'd now request you to travel back with me in time to the time when human beings came into this lovely earth. We have referred to them as hunter-gatherers, nomads, who are not really rooted to any particular part of land. Their lives might have come with a lot of risks, but leisure time was always a part and parcel of their lives. If you see this child holding a knife, today you may never want to see a child holding a knife, because we are definitely paranoid about a lot of things. But play, engagement, leisure, work was all a part and parcel of every day's life. And they had enough time to go in and out of play, which is why I would call the play during that time as organic and free-flowing. It was not an industry. Bones, seeds, trees, shells, mud, stones, each of them could have been their playthings. The connect with nature was very, very high in each of their activities, and there was no need of ownership. If we travel a little ahead in time, when us human beings learned the skill of agriculture and we started settling in different places, civilization started coming up. So we do see play artifacts from those time periods, right? Even though the people during those time had a large connect with nature and ecosystem, the path for ownership had already started creeping in for simple needs like playthings too, apart from bigger needs of home and land and food. But I would still like to say that the games that developed during these periods continue to reflect their ecosystem. The skill sets as an agriculturist or a potter was very obvious when you saw some of the games that were played. Palangri, which we will talk a little in detail a little later, we can understand how the agricultural, agrarian context comes alive in this particular game. It might be a woodworker also whose specialty, whose skill set was shown. And of course, a large part of the games reflected their spiritual belief systems, like Srimati Vijayalakshmi spoke about it earlier. Paramapada Sopanapatam is a game that reflects the Sanatana Dharma's belief in karma, the life cycle of birth and death. It has an immense spiritual backing to it, which we seem to be forgetting today. The game of Ur from the Mesopotamian civilization has its own elements of belief in life after death too. So in a sense, if I were to say, the people during this phase onwards had enough connect with nature, but play was slowly starting to become a little more regimented. But here comes a time from the 1st century, different kingdoms started ruling over various parts of the world, and we started seeing seeds of an unequal world. There was a disconnect from nature. The cultural variants were plenty because every little group had its own little art and skill that were brought up. So there was no dearth of cultural variance in any of these aspects, be it games or paintings or sculptures. A lot of spare resources were devoted to this. But the inequality, if you notice the two pictures that I have put up here, one is of a very rich play element, the dice and pawns for the game Kavade, studded with emeralds and rubies, while on the other side you can also see that play happened with just drawing on stone, or it could have been mud. Although there was these differences, because of the innate simplicity of the ancient games, it did not stop people who had lesser resources from playing. It continued, and the cultural variance also grew exponentially. which is lovely too. But in the last 300 years, since when there has been a huge transformation in our worlds, industrialization has set in, and we as a species, I feel, we have utilized natural resources far beyond our allowance, right? We've been witnessing the growing hazard of homogenization of cultures across all parts of the world in different livelihoods. You see the same kind of livelihoods, you see the same kind of living styles, you see similar play happening, identical constructions, eating habits. We have kind of cut off that variety that was there in all our lives. The industrial monoculture is what we call it, is by itself a tragedy. And our time for leisure and play has become highly structured and regimented, to the point that it has to be introduced specially into our lives, saying, this is the time you have to play, this is the time you need to study, this is the time you sit and work. Those are not the people you sit and play with. So those are different layers that have happened. And in many ways, you know, when I think of leisure becoming an industry, we as Kavade, I take credit, or I take ownership of the fact that our existence itself is an irony, because our games don't really need a store or a space like this to be learning the games. But I would also like to say that we will persist till these simple pastimes become our way of life. We would definitely be able to learn a lot about play if it wasn't studied just in the context of children. It's not just about consuming, buying games from shops and loading our houses with different kinds of games. It's about that engagement. How well are you engaging with the game, with your nature, with your ecosystem, with the people in and around you, to create that loving and joyful environment that play automatically provides. I feel that is the bit that we are really missing. And my strong feeling is that let's not splice it into generations, but have the learning of play in the context of all kinds of people, age, gender, caste, creed. It has to cross those barriers. And in this sense, I would say play is actually universal. Irrespective of any part of the world that you come from, there is a sense of play that is happening. There is so much variety, but then there is a similarity in terms of why one is playing. What are the kind of equipments that are used could be varying, but then it's the same purpose. And the sentiments, possibly human emotions, beliefs, systems, the spiritual thoughts that are running in all our different cultures are what come alive when we look at play from all these different cultures. I would now like to kind of show you a very simple game, which again Vijay was talking about earlier. The simple game of play. Sorry, I'll have to stop share and share something new. The simple game of the 5 stones, right? We've all probably seen it, and this is also a game that doesn't need you to gather much, right? It is for having those stones, a game of dexterity. It's not very easy, let me tell you. A lot of cheating also happens when you play these games. You need to be very skillful when you're playing it too. You don't have stones, you can just collect some seeds from around your house. Just walk around, you might find some really beautiful stones or seeds, and that itself can be used to play this game. Don't stress yourself too much about not being able to catch it. It's a whole juggling act. But let me tell you, you play this game, you try playing it, try catching even one at a time. There's a high that you get when you actually manage to play the game. And it's a very simple thing for you to carry back. I hope the video was shared well enough for you all to watch it. If not, we can always try and show you a demo later. I'd now request Rohan to let you feast your eyes on some really beautiful depictions of all our games in the art and culture world.
I think that was wonderful. I think just looking at the video, I felt like my hands were sort of twitching to be part of that game, and it's so true. Games are such a visual medium as well. And talking of visuals, I just want to tease you a little bit with pictures from history and depictions of board games in Indian art and culture. As you can see here, this is a very interesting one. This is a dice found in Mohenjo-daro, and it's one of the earliest evidences of Indian, board games in general and games in particular. And it's very interesting here. You can see the modern die, if you know, will have points on any two opposite sides, amounting to number 7. So if you have 6, which should be opposite 1, 3 opposite 4, and so on. But this die in particular, and it seems like it was the case for most ancient dies, has the numbers adjacent, which is very interesting. So all the examples found are exceedingly well made as well, and they have well-defined edges. And the points are very shallow, which really tells you of the craftsmanship even 2,500 years ago. And these dice must have been sort of thrown on a soft surface, such as a piece of cloth or a dusty ground for the edges to show very little sign of wear, which is very interesting. And then as we sort of move ahead, dice and counters have been found at sites, like I said, Harappa, Lothal, Mohenjo-daro. And these primitive sort of board games have also been found etched onto the floors of caves and temples, going back to sort of early centuries of the Common Era, like Bhaja, Ajanta, Ellora, and Maharashtra. And this is one from sort of Turja Leni in which is sort of a Buddhist rock cut cave monuments in Maharashtra, which is interesting. Again, we're just scratching the surface here. I mean, there's lots more, and I know that there's a video coming up showing you different etchings on different types of caves as well. And this one is actually one of my favorites. One of the most enduring sort of motifs throughout Indian art has been Shiva and Parvati playing a game of dice. And this is one such relief from Madhya Pradesh. It's right now at the Durgavati Museum in Jabalpur. But as you can see here, if you look very closely, you see Parvati is holding a die in her hand. And she's about to play. And this is a very important theme. And it seems to appear in many sort of cave temples in Western Maharashtra, where such scenes really appear in prominent positions in relation to the central shrine. And it's almost sort of the way it goes is, Shiva and Parvati are playing a game of dice, and Shiva is always losing to Parvati. And this recurrent loss of Shiva to Parvati has led some scholars to sort of wonder, why does Shiva even play? Why does the god keep slipping into this game of dice, knowing as he seems to that he will almost, certainly lose, and that sort of other destructive consequences will flow from this defeat. But the Puranic tradition, and I think this is instance of, I think, Skanda Purana, is created as a result of this divine play between Shiva and Parvati that sort of represent Purusha and Prakriti, with each move of the players mirroring sort of different states of the world. And references to board games in general have also been found in sort of the Rig Veda, which has the Aksha Sukta, it's just dedicated to a game of dice. And the Skanda Purana, like I mentioned, dated to the 7th century, mentions a game of dice between Shiva and Parvati. So I'm not a big fan of dating, because dating can sort of, it's a very sort of linear way of looking at time, whereas, Indian tradition is always based on the looking at time as a cyclical format, with the concept of yugas and everything. However, I think it's very interesting to see that such complex notions, existed back in time. And then as we sort of start to move ahead a little bit, we see a courtyard. And for those who've been to Fatehpur Sikri in Agra, you'll see a courtyard which shows Pachisi was an accepted, as an imperial game in Akbar's court. Although the, obviously the origins go way back in time. And then this is a very popular figure, the Maharaja of Mysore, Krishna Raja Vadiyar III, who had an immense contribution to the culture of Mysore. And, he was a multifaceted, multi-talented genius. He was a polyglot, a scholar, a poet, writer, artist, musician, and yet not many people know that he was also an inventor of many board games. And many of his board games are actually part of private collections scattered over the world. He invented quite a lot of games, but part of his collection is also sort of well known. This example you see is a game of Panchi, which is a race game inscribed on a brass plate, which was then quote unquote gifted to the British Museum. And then this is again one of the sort of more interesting pieces where it's a mural, but it depicts a puzzle called the Knight's Tour, which he's sort of credited with having sort of invented. But you also see the Knight's Tour, dating back to 9th century in some of the Indian works. But what is the Knight's Tour? Basically, it's a puzzle, and it's a sort of it's a variation of chess, where the puzzle is the knight has to start at any point on the board, and the knight must sort of can only step on it once, and the idea is to traverse the whole board with having sort of gone on one square only once. And there are some billions of combinations in which this can be done. And this is again, it's you don't need 2 or 3 players to play this game. This is something it can be an exercise in sort of, it's like solving a puzzle really, but it's also a board game, which is very interesting, just how it transcends the sort of the ideas of what board games should be. And on that note, I'm going to sort of hand over back to Sreeranjini. And if you can take us through the next section, please. Thank you.
This will be a neat follow-up. Am I audible? Sorry.
Yes, you are. Yeah.
This will be a neat follow-up from what we just saw, Pachisi game, the race games that are so beautifully depicted in the different mediums. We are now going to show you how to play one of the race games. Give me a minute while we switch from onto our
You have to unmute yourself.
Is just sorry for the tech glitch. So most people do think this is the game that was played. It is possibly the fact that artists have rendered Pandavas and Kauravas playing the game with each other, but we really don't know if this is a game that was played between them, because what is referred to in that in the epic is the cousins played and lost over a game of dice. So it could have been any game that they played, not necessarily the same game. Having said that, because of that infamous connect to this game, a lot of people in India do not keep Kavade in their house. It's definitely not the dice, which is believed to have been made by the bone of Tapti, right? So let's take you through the quick idea of how this game is played. It's a game for 4 people, as you can see. And by now you also know which is the game that has become highly popular in the Western world. It is the Ludo. Ludo is a household game today. Every child has a Ludo game. Even in India, Ludo is there, while many households within India do not have a game of Kavade. It is beautiful in its own way. While the American variant, which is called Parcheesi, has given due credit to the Indian origin, calling it Parcheesi, the royal game of India. Okay? When you pick the game to start, I would like to put a disclaimer here. There are many ways of playing each of our ancient games, but I would like to take you through one variety of playing the game. And the dice that we're going to use for this particular game is the cuboid dice. The numberings are very different. It is 1, 3, 4, and 6 on each of the sides. So when you throw the 2 dice together, the combinations with which you get, the numbers that you get are very different. Whatever number you get can move one of your pieces so many steps. So if I want to move one piece for the count of 4, I would move another piece for the count of 1. If I didn't want to do this, then I could move one single pawn for the entire number, which is 5 steps ahead. If when I throw, I get the same number on both the dice, 4 and 4 here, then I can utilize the pair that was given to me at the beginning of the game and move them both 4 steps ahead. And now, like in any race game, having a pair is very beautiful because it is a fortification view. An opponent cannot come around having got a 4, he cannot kill a pair. That is the advantage of having a pair. The objective of this game is for you to travel all around the board, okay, and then come inside and finish your game first. So you need to bring all 4 of your pieces into the finish board. I don't know if you noticed, when I finished the travel all around, I came here and put my pawn to sleep. This is a very interesting quirk that I have noticed with a lot of people, the older generation. If you didn't put it to sleep and kept it like this, when you enter the belly again, they will say this pawn has to start going around again. Around. So be very careful when you're playing with people from the older generation. When you enter here, put your pawn to sleep, and from here on, it has to get an exact number to finish the. And like in any race game, a pawn can come and upon getting the same number as landing on the square, it can cut your pawn and send it out of the game. And you have to give rebirth to that pawn from inside and start the game. Or it is as simple as that. You can create your own variants too, because that is the beauty of games. But at the same time, I'd like to give you a quick glimpse of another variant of this game, which is mostly played in the Tamil Nadu region. It is called the Dayakattam. Extremely similar. The dice with the Tamil Nadu game are slightly different. Here, if you saw the marking 1, 3, 4, 6 on the dice, on the Dayakattam games, you see the marking 1, 2, 3, and then a blank. Now, in Tamil Nadu games, predominant when you throw the dice, the possibility of getting a 1 is held in high respect. I also think the word dayam means relationship. So relationship is also given a lot of prominence. Only put 1 can you start your journey. The rest of the game goes very similar. You travel out. There are little nuances that change from this to another. But if I go on about the varieties in each of these games, there is no end to it. Go ahead, just draw this out onto a piece of paper, create your own dice, use seeds and shells as your pawns, and have your own game with your parents and grandparents, and you see how much fun it is going to be. I hope you were able to get a bit of an idea of how the game Pagade Pachisi is played. It has many different names, Pagade, Chaucer, quite a bit. But here on, I'd like to quickly take you through the idea behind why we believe in ancient games. why do we even need to look at ancient games? Is there any sense in going ancient, right? It seems very retrogressive when you look at doing something from the olden age. So first and foremost, like we just saw, any game from our ancient period can be played with absolute simplicity. You don't need a huge infrastructure. Just a little bit of evolving of your pawns and your materials, and then how to draw it out is all you need. And that very element gets you connected to nature. So for me, I feel these ancient games take you so much back to nature, connecting, grounding yourself into the culture of your land, that I do not want to let go of it so easily, which makes me hold on to ancient games. And this is something I'd really like to harp on, because we have come to a world today where every activity is sliced out. When I'm saying spliced out, if it's entertainment, or there's something that an 8-year-old does with another 8-year-old, or maybe a 10-year-old, but not even a 15-year-old. A 15-year-old playing with a 50-year-old? No way, right? We've come to that space today. But try and play any of these games. There is so much of challenge that an 8-year-old can bring onto the table as much as an 80-year-old could bring onto the table. Here's a lovely picture of two different groups of people who walked into our store one of these days. I'd like to tell you a little more in detail here, because they walked in and I was taking the older gentleman and his family around the store, showing them the games. And when the other bunch of youngsters came in, my shop manager, Uma, she took them around showing the games. And after a point of time, both of them converged at this table trying to learn the game Navakankari. And you should have seen, it took 2 minutes for these people. One is at the 60-year age spectrum, another is the 25-year-old youngster standing there. And they just started chatting off with each other, learning about each other while the game was happening. So those kind of conversations kind of bring alive something else that brings a different energy onto the table. And that power for that is definitely there in ancient games. I don't really see that in games that we play on iPads or PUBG or any of the other games that we are all getting exposed to largely these days. And nostalgia, we discussed this at the early stages of the workshop today. Such lovely memories that make us smile, make us laugh, share stories that we want to almost create such lovely memories for ourselves and our children for the times to come by. And this, any ancient game you see, it takes you back to a time and place that is so different, gives you a quick peek into the history of our nation. For example, this is a beautiful, very well designed game box by Mummadi Krishraj Wadiyar, because it is very close to where Rohan lives now, 5 minutes walk from his place, because it's sitting in the British Museum now. But when you look at it, the kind of artwork that was existing during that time, or if you look at Akbar's Fatehpur Sikri and the big Pachisi board that Rohan showed us a few minutes back, you know that some of these kings were connoisseurs of ancient games. They loved the games, they loved to promote them. And in fact, Mummadi Krishnaraj Wadiyar is credited with creating games for his soldiers, which kind of kept them sharp in their head. So if it's a game of tiger and goat, he created so many variants based on his own surroundings and the strategizing, war strategy, the variations that came in to let his people engage more and keep their, the brain working stronger and sharper. And of course, it is again a window into the spiritual and philosophical belief systems. A game called Amrit and Vish talks about the balance in nature. If you go a little deeper into any of the games that we hear from our grandparents or from our ancient textbooks, you know there is something more beyond just the gameplay. Like Rohan was talking about Shiva and Parvati in the game of dice. It is basically the Purusha and Prakriti that are not existent without each other. And that Leela comes up wherein he's showing that I keep losing, because that's the way you kind of disengage from the life's attachments. It's quite beautiful philosophies that we get when we look into all of this. I think Rohan will be digging deeper into all these in the next section, which we'll soon follow. And if not any of these, please play ancient games because they're great fun. They're great fun and you'll enjoy winning, losing, and fighting with your family, exchanging all those conversations with your family. Play just for that. Now I'd like to hand over to Rohan to take people through.
Yeah, actually, you mentioned Pachisi. It actually
mic is
struck
not
me when you
on,
mentioned.
Rohan.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
You're
Okay.
on.
No, I just wanted to mention a quick story on obviously Ludo and Pachisi and the fact that Alfred Collier, this gentleman in England, he actually applied for a patent claiming that the board game which he named Royal Ludo, was his invention, which was obviously Pachisi. The patent was approved a few months later, and that granted him full commercial rights for the game, and obviously barred everyone else from replicating the game. I don't think the patent's valid anymore, but it shows how sort of those Ludo boards were actually sold across the world, and then it sort of came back to India from the West. And this is sort of just another example of how sort of Indian inventions get appropriated and sold back to Indians, which serves as a sort of a wake-up call. But we'll try and stay optimistic on this one. Okay, so I want to now just go into the cosmological, spiritual, cultural significance of board games. And again, we have the tendency of viewing board games as sort of something you win or lose. But in the Indian context, it really gets another dimension. And indeed, many ancient civilizations as well, the idea of board games was beyond, yes, an incredibly, a useful pastime, but also an exercise in sort of reflection. So as you can see on the slide now, just as an example, the Ashtapada board, which is sort of an 8x8 board, and just the idea of race games in particular, where you have to actually start at the end of, at the sort of periphery of the board and gradually make your way towards the center. And the Ashtapada board actually replicates or represents the image of an ideal city and of the world. It also actually very closely replicates, if you're sort of an architecture, if you're a person who's interested in architecture, it replicates Nandavarta, which is the oldest Indian urban model, along with other sort of urban models. But this is very interesting because it actually represents a microcosmical analogy of a person trying to reach their sort of most spiritual part. And that's sort of the center, their Agni, or, their spiritual self. And again, the player advances towards the center with a clear intention. Like they do actually want to, at the same time, becomes the microcosmical analogy of the person reaching their most spiritual path. So it's very surprising that scientific research about board games has not been very intensive in the last few centuries. But in fact, they represent much more than a game of where someone loses or wins. And then you have from the board game we go into sort of the movement of pieces, and they reflect the sort of cyclical concept of time that I spoke about earlier, which is very distinct. We have the tendency of documenting history as a sort of linear sort of, a bunch of milestones as such. However, the sort of Indian way of looking at it, and especially Hindu cosmology, talks about the idea of time being cyclical, which kind of intuitively makes sense in a way, because, everything, when we look at years, the seasons, the days, it's almost sort of a repetition of patterns of seasons. And why wouldn't you expand that idea to the concept of time, of yugas, where you have a cyclical, start, destruction, and rejuvenation of eras. So this is very interesting. And backgammon as a sport, as a game, is seen to represent this sort of idea of cosmic time and karma and rebirth, and the cycles of of astronomical bodies, etc. It's very interesting when you look at it. And then you have Pachisi, which again represents the stages of life. Few scholars have also said that they represent the four varnas, but it's sort of the idea that there's a grid again represents the idea of sort of city planning, and the idea that the square is at the center is where all the action happens, and the goal of this game is obviously where you sort of almost ambulate around the board and go towards the center. Again, these ideas are very complex, and it's way beyond the scope of an 1 hour session. But again, it's something that hopefully we're sort of encouraging you to delve deeper into it. And this is again one of my absolute favorites. Just the idea of Leela as life as play. This is a game of snakes and ladders, I think from Nagpur, and I think it's around the 16th or 17th century, and it's said to have been invented by Naneshwar Maharaj, and it's sort of very interesting to see that what we know as snakes and ladders today, where the sort of objective is go on square number 100 and that's it. Whoever gets there first wins. With Moksha Patham, the idea is to actually reach your spiritual self. And that, again, is not really square number 100, but the original sort of version of Snakes and Ladders is Moksha Patham, which is basically moksha meaning obviously sort of salvation in a very sort of rough translation from English. But it's the goal here is to actually reach number 68, which is the Vaikuntha, also known as Vaikuntha Valley, which basically means that you're navigating different squares and reaching number 68. If you go beyond 68, you just have to wait until that snake brings you down to 51 and you start again. But this again is the idea of the cyclical nature of life, of death and rebirth. And you can see there's a direct ladder from number 54, which is called Bhakti or devotion, right to sort of Vaikuntha, which is basically the sort of essence of Bhakti yoga. Now, the other idea here is, what if I told you that the Snakes and Ladders board is actually a periodic table of consciousness? And this is very interesting, because the Western mind really has sort of created a periodic table of the elements. They have mastered the art of the phenomenal world, the sort of 103 fundamental organizations of matter, the elements. And this is the essence of the West's understanding of the phenomenal world. The Eastern man, however, pursued a different course. And I mean man in a very non-gender specific way here. But in India, particularly in a very sort of temperate climate where, it's easy to sort of, with the easy cultivation of crops, sort of the idea of nature was kind of a mother principle, and we did not develop a conquest of nature that would sort of prevent our own survival. And therefore, the scientific spirit of the Indian sages and seers turned inwards, and to investigate the complexity of the human consciousness. And these ideas then sort of started manifesting themselves in different products and different ways in which board games in particular become a culture, carriers of culture. And this again, this is exactly what it is. Mokshapadam is actually a periodic table of your inner consciousness. As the person advances from square to square and space to space, they're starting to discover the patterns in their inner existence. And again, the idea that board games doesn't have to necessarily be a social construct, but also an exercise where you can play this on your own and really start to reflect on the different facets of your own inner existence. It's almost like a meditation. So we also need to think of board games as sort of a way to sort of get spiritually and spiritually involved with yourself. A book that I would really, really recommend people who want to sort of, get into, this is The Yoga of Snakes and Ladders. It is one of my absolute favorites in terms of understanding snakes and ladders from a very, ancient and true to roots point of view by the amazing scholar Harish Johri, and a lot of his other books as well are really, really recommended. And on that note, it's my turn to hand over to Sreeranjini, who will take you into what's going on now and next.
Yeah, thank you so much. Here's a little question for all of you. While I narrate a little story, you can give me your idea of what game this is that Saint Tyagaraja was talking about in this little composition. Request you to put down your guesses in the chat window while I just entertain you with a little story that happened in my own life. So we were traveling to in Shimoga, beautiful part of Karnataka, lovely trees, winding roads. And then at some point of time, we had a vehicle breakdown and we had to pause to wait for a vehicle to come and replace this that was not functioning. So while we were waiting, we just took a little walk, few of us on that lovely little road in between our journey. And I was kind of drawn to this particular house as we were walking. It was a beautiful, huge tree. And then I was just standing there in awe. I don't even know what it was that drew me to that house, whether the tree or the house that was deeply set in. But as I was standing and watching, the door opened. And my immediate urban instinct was to step back and, I was afraid where I might be shooed away. But here comes that bit about our Atiti Satkara, the culture that we have as Indians, right? The lady opened the door and she said, of course she spoke in Kannada, but I will say that in English. She asked me what I was doing. I said, no, I was trying to be defensive. I said, no, I was just walking around, nothing much. She said, do you want to come into the house? I said, no, that's okay. We are a big gang. I said, no, please don't worry. Drop into the house. And the whole bunch, we just happily walked into the house. And there was this beautiful portico in front of our house. And we were all seated there. And she comes to us with a plate loaded with savories and coffee. And added to that was this little game that was embedded on the seating area in her portico. And that is the game that Tyagaraja was talking about even in this game, in this composition where he says, Lord Rama, please let me also hear the words that you told Sita when she won this game of Aluguli Mane. This is lovely to see that game board that was sitting there, and we were spending time waiting for our vehicle to arrive, collecting those seeds that were there. So that tree was a tamarind tree that she had in her compound, collecting those seeds and then playing the game. Time just flew and we just went our own paths. And that is a very beautiful part of our culture where you let people come in and go. There is that flow and then we all go in different directions. But as long as we are engaging with each other, we're just keeping each other happy and engaged. So right now, I'd like to now take you through the demo of this lovely game, Aluguli Mane. So that's Sita. While we are at it, I could also tell you that Sita was believed to have is believed to have played this game Palanguri while she was kept captive by Ravana. And since she was alone, she played a lone version of the game, which, if possible, I'll try to demonstrate now. And that game was called Sita Pandi. So here's the game Palanguri, which has as many names as the number of people in our could call it Chennai Mane, Aluguri Mane, Gatkuni Mane, many names. And if you go to Africa, you're going to see huge variants of the same game. But the game comes, for me, it seems very obvious that it has a huge agrarian context. The reason I say that is this whole game board is like an agricultural field. You have plots and you have seeds that are being sown, and the work that is then done over the entire field is by all players who own the different parts of the field. The objective of this game is to get the maximum harvest in either of our stores. When you look at this game board, you see 7 cups on one side, 7 cups on the other side, and there are 2 stores which are going to take all your collections in. If I were to get into the game specifics directly, right now we have played 5 shells in each of the cups. So the 4 all got 5 shells each. You can play this game by putting in each cup 5 shells or even 12 shells or even more. It depends on your patience and persistence. And different strategies again can be brought about. Again, I'd like to say one variant is what I'd like to show while we are understanding. So in my turn, I can choose to pick up any of the shells on my side. My side and the opponent side is only for beginning one turn. If I choose to pick up all the 5 shells here, I go seeding anti-clockwise direction, one by one, till my hand is empty. And when my hand is empty, I pick up shells from the next cup and I keep going. I keep going doing the serial seeding till my last shell falls in a cup of which I have nothing to pick up. So I continuously do this, and my shell lastly has fallen here and the cup next to it. So this is when.
1 second.
Sreeranjini,
Stop sharing.
can you stop sharing screen and then bring the other one, because we can't see you otherwise. Yes.
You want me to start all over again, or are we good? So sorry about that.
Yeah, you have to start all over again because nobody saw anything about what you were doing there.
Start all over. So basically, the game has 7 shells on each side, and we have started by putting 5 shells in each cup. If I go around doing 5 shells right now, we might take time, but I will show you how the game goes. I can choose to pick up shells from any of the cups on my side, while the opponent, when they begin their turn, they start picking up shells from their side. My side and their side is only for the beginning of your turn. So if I choose to pick up shells from here, I go feeding anti-clockwise, and when my hand is empty, I pick up shells from the next cup, and I keep feeding till the last shell falls to a cup, after which there is an empty cup, and that's when we start collecting. So now the last shell fell in this cup, and there's an empty cup beyond it, and I have nothing to continue the skill feeding with. So whatever is next to the empty cup and the one on the opposite side is what I get down, and I put it into my store here. Okay? At this point, my turn gets over, and my opponent takes their turn, and they can start from any of the cups on their side. Before I get into showing that, I'd like you to understand that this game has also been designed in such a way that both players are kept active while the other player is playing the game. Because at any point, if there is a 4 accumulating in any of the cups on your side, it is your prerogative to take it and put it into your store. and not let your opponent destroy your chance by dropping another seed or shell. That is called as karu or pashu in Tamil. It is those bonus things that also, as in a game, as in winning, you could just possibly collect a lot more seeds and shells and become winner. So if the opponent decides to start from this cup, he also goes anti-clockwise, seeding similarly, waiting. He got an empty cup very soon. So this is an empty cup. Whatever is next to the empty cup and on the opposite side is his collection. In the first glimpse, the game looks like there is absolutely no strategy in it. But if you were to go back and play with somebody who's played this for several years, you'll notice that very quickly they make those calculations and decide what cup they want to start their turn with so they get the maximum capture on their turn. So the game ends when all of us have made our captures and there is nothing more for one of us to play during our turn to start their turn with. So if you look at it at this point of time, if I were to begin my turn, there is nothing on my side to begin my turn. This is when the game comes to a close. And whatever is there on the opponent side goes into their store. And you can call the game to a finish at this point of time, or by calculating and seeing who has the maximum number of shells, or you can refill the cup with the same number of seeds. And at this point, I have only enough for 4 cups. And these 3 are not going to be used in the next turn. Obviously, my opponent has enough to fill up all theirs, and there'll be some extra sitting in their store. Our game will now go in this manner. And whatever captures I make during this, if I make more, then I might be able to fill up the next further cups. And the game can go on and on till one of us is reduced to a pauper. If I have time, I can give you a quick glimpse of the Sita Kandi. It's quite interesting for somebody who is interested in maths too. I'm filling up the shells in the cup in this manner. One shell, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the next one, and 7 in the last cup. Similarly, on the opponent side, it is going to be 1 to 7. Now, Sita Pandi, anything that's auspicious in our culture, it always goes clockwise. Sita Pandi is a game that goes clockwise too. So you pick up all the shells from the cup that holds 7 shells, and you go seeding clockwise this time, and your 1 seed ends there. You'll be able to pick up and the game keeps going round and round 108 times, after which it comes back to the same 1 to 7 and 1 to 7. There's some of my the visitors who come to our school have said, this is the game we used to get my grandchild to play because she would bother me a lot while I was doing some work. So that's the game of Sita Pandi. I'm sorry if there were some glitches and you were unable to watch the game. We can always do it another time in person also. You're most welcome to the store. I would also like to quickly show you some, again, it's a feasting time. You can have a look at some of the lovely inscriptions that are there across our country for quite a bit of our strategy games, the hunt games, tiger and goat, cow and leopard, all in the temple premises. That's the tiger and goat game. Some of them can be false positives too. Some of them you don't know what game it is. Could be, maybe not you're going to. Any temple you visit, any historic building you visit, the entryways, the seating areas, you will find these games etched and carved. Very beautiful. infinity. Do we have time now for a demo of any of the games?
Yes, sure, you can go ahead.
We could probably do a demonstration of the hunt games, the tiger and goat, cow and leopard. There are many variants. I think again today we will do one, the tiger and goat game, and possibly the game called the Salu Ata or Navakankari.
Sreeranjini,
Game. We call it
Sreeranjini.
leopard. Hunt games basically the prey predator game where there's a bigger number of the predator, which is in this case the tiger, and a smaller number. Sorry, bigger number of the prey who have to really protect themselves from the predator. So in this particular structure, we have 3 tigers and 15 goats. The goats come onto the board one by one while the tiger makes the move, which is also there on the board. The objective in this game is for the tiger, which is controlled by one player, and the goats, which are controlled by another player. Whenever the tiger gets an opportunity to jump over a goat in that line, it can capture a goat. But if there are 2 goats together, then they are strong. They're like working as a team, and you cannot jump over them. You cannot kill the goat. So goats try to clump up to protect themselves, while the tiger is trying to get a lone goat and capture it out of the game. If the tiger, in this particular number of goats, 15 goats, if the tiger manages to capture 6 goats, the tiger wins the game. While goat, the objective is very different. So this falls into a category of unequal game. Both players don't have the same objective in this particular game. The objective for the opponent is to be able to corner all 3 tigers in such a manner that they have absolutely no move to make. You see that? How the game progresses is you start the game by placing the 3 tigers on the apex of the board. All the boards are off the game board, and they come off the board one by one in its turn until the 15 goats come off the board. They cannot start moving while the tigers begin their moves at the start of the game. So very quickly I'll show you. Say one goat comes onto the board, a tiger makes it. Another goat comes onto the move, tiger makes the move. Now the goat has to protect itself and it cannot move, but it can bring another goat to that spot so that the tiger cannot jump over. And the tiger makes another move. So this keeps going on till all the 15 goats come onto the board. Once they're there, then they also start moving, and it starts developing the next level of complexity for this particular game. Similar gameplay you see even in this structure, and this one too. In this particular variant, I really urge you to draw these games and play, because with just this one structure, you can play at least 5 different variants of the hunt game. Here you have 2 leopards and 24 cows, and the same objective where the leopards need to capture at least 12 cows to win the game, while for the cows they have to corner both the leopards. If you remove these triangles from time, what remains here as a square and plate is the national game of Nepal, which is called Bhaksha. And if you were to just draw this plate, you can have a simple game of tiger, just one tiger and three. Just try it; it's beautiful. I could show you a few more variants if you want. And like you saw the carvings in the previous video, any of the structures can be drawn, derive your own tigers and goats and play with it. Yeah. Well, I'd like to quickly show you another game called Navakankari. Navakankari means 9 stones or 9 soldiers. The game is the precursor of what we all very commonly know today get your pieces 3 in a row. It's quite a strategy. It's a very equal thought game. Each player puts their pieces out, 9 pieces out there, and you take turns and bringing your pieces onto the board. It can be any part of the board. Your objective is to get your pieces 3 in a line, and your opponent tries to block it from forming. But the interesting thing about this game is it doesn't end with just one 3. Let me show you. Suppose an opponent makes this, you get to block it, and then an opponent takes another piece, and you bring another one here. And at some point of time, if one of us manages to make a middle, which is a 3 in a row, then the opponent can capture one of the player can capture an opponent's piece of the board, and the game continues. After all the pieces have come onto the board, then the game progresses and movement. So there are 2 phases in this game. One is where the piece comes forward, trying to form a 3 in a row, and the second phase now is you're trying to move, and every move you're trying to make a 3 in a row and trying to make a capture. So now with this move, I've made another 3 in a row. I get a capture. The game goes on till one of us is reduced to only 2 pieces standing on the board, after which we cannot make any. This is a very simpler game, and it's the African inspiration of the game being told. And there they call it Moraba Raba. Thank you so much. I'd request Rohan now to take over and show all of us what Ishva is doing.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I must say it's such an amazing view of the games, and they're really promising to look at. And hopefully, at some point, I can visit your Kavade at some point in the future, and we can have a game of goats and tigers. On that note, I just want to take you through quickly on, just on our thoughts and reflections on, what the sort of current state of board games is. And again, I sort of invite the audience to, say a few things if they need to in terms of their sort of remarks. But the current state of board games in India, there's a lot of interest. There's a lot of interest in board games in general. I think with the current atmosphere of, obviously we had this year has been crazy in terms of, the lockdowns and, which has kind of prompted people to stay indoors and start to sort of, reflect on, the sort of deconstruct things that they do, etc. And I think board games has been one of those pastimes that have sort of seen a bit of a revival, and something that we've done on our sort of Instagram channel as well. But I think the challenge here is that the adoption is a bit low because people also have technology there. There are apps all around, and not to say that they're a sort of they're a bad thing. But at the same time, I think the sort of physical, the idea of playing a board game is unmatched. But I think the way we can sort of revive traditional board games is really, in my head, there's 3 pillars that you can look at it. There's awareness, so awareness of actually board games, that sort of originated in India, but also sort of are part of the living tradition of India. And then the prestige of having inherited this in terms of, even if it's your sort of immediate family, but also looking at games as a sort of inheritance in addition to what other things that you might have. And then the third pillar is about the product. So I think the products, they're the sort of carriers of culture. I think when you have a tangible sort of thing that you own, it becomes the marker of your culture and heritage. And I think lots of countries today that are really ranked high on soft power, they have a really good presence in the sort of retail scene, as I've seen living all these years in London as well. Some of the things that we try to do with Ishwa is, on our Instagram channel, some of our viewers may be familiar with, or who are joining from our sort of Instagram, may be familiar with some of these posts that we basically, turned, games into something that can be a bit more interesting and appealing. to the sort of modern context and the Instagram first generation. And these posts, you can read about them in more detail on our website as well as on the Instagram channel. But the interesting thing here is, so what we set out to do with Ishwa is basically become a platform for all things that are culturally rooted in Indian ideas. And we want to take this a step further from being just an ideas and content-based platform to being actually a platform where, it connects culture with commerce. And I think that's something that has been missing from the soft power initiatives of India in context of other great superpowers in terms of, India is really the only large economy today that kind of fares not well on the soft power rankings. We're sort of around the number 30 in the world, whereas countries such as China and the US and the UK, they have really invested in this perception of what the country is, and it's largely connected with sort of tangible acquiring of retail. So permeating culture through commerce is a big trend today in cosmopolitan culture, and that's something that I wanted to bring in with Ishwa. So what we are as a platform, as you can see on the screen, we have a wonderful blog in terms of, just looking at different facets of Indian culture, but we're sort of deconstructing them to look at it from a very sort of civilizational point of view, because again, the idea of India is terribly outdated, especially outside of India, in terms of what really India is. And there are very few initiatives that go beyond sort of colonial timelines. And something that we want to sort of stress on with Ishwa is that that India may be a young country, but it's a living, thriving, age-old, and one of the oldest civilizations to still survive, right? And again, we want to take the idea of made in India, and what it means to us is the fact that India is actually recognized for her cultural heritage, which dates back to several millennia, and when we talk about the sages and the rich delving into the study of the mind, body, and spirit, and things like yoga, Vedanta, Ayurveda, Vastu, and other such life positive ideas weren't just ideas. They then became part of the existence of the living traditions of India that continue to this day. And they're definitely worth sharing with the world. And addition to that, India has always been a trading nation. When we have such a long coastline, and there's documented history of products being traded extensively with other ancient civilizations. In fact, India, with its sort of flourishing maritime sway for more than 2,000 years, has always been a trading nation. But we didn't have the sort of imperialist ambitions that you see these days. And there was a lot of export or import of goods. Refined products of culture, and those products had actually a meaning. They were not just sort of baseless trading, but they actually had much more appreciation in the wider global context. So that's what we want to revive with Ishwa, is basically, with the sort of world coming full circle with the ideas of conscious living. There hasn't been a better time to consolidate all of these amazing brands that are doing, great things such as Kavade. We want to sort of bring them together in a sort of, India only sort of culturally rooted setting, which tends not to happen very much. And just as to give you a bit of a flavor on what we have right now is, we have a virtual showroom of, different brands. And also, as you can see on the right, a brand name and a brand page that each brand gets with us. So we're still sort of, in conversations with different brands. The response has been fantastic. And at the same time, if you're a brand that's, doing great things, we'd love to hear from you. And, try and, if you want to play a part in actually helping fulfill India's soft power potential, we'd love to hear from you as well. And on that note, I'm gonna sort of, just a bit of a shameless plug here. Follow us on our Instagram channel at Ishwa Indian, and please visit ishwa.co. Thank you.
Arunima?
Over to you.
So I'd like to quickly take you through what we have been doing with Kavade. The three basic principles by which we have been working for the last 10 odd years is: one is to definitely revive our ancient and traditional board games. Two is to have the materials that we're using, we want to keep it as far as possible eco-friendly. So we're very conscious about the materials we use, the games that we sell from our store. And the third is we've been working with self-help groups to create either a small part of the game board or the game board itself. So these three aspects we've managed to keep alive for the last 11 years now from when we started. And it gives me great pride to tell you that some of the organizations that we're working with are spread across the country. I mean, the self-help groups or the people, the artisans. We've been having wonderful engagement with all of them, starting from Kanyakumari, Banaras, Madhya Pradesh. We've been working with the artisans across the country, and each of it brings a different flavor for us. And the fact that ours is the only store, physical store, which is completely dedicated to the ancient games is something that has been hard to sustain, but it is a very rigid and stubborn belief in the strength of these games that we've stuck to that as a concept and never really diverted from it. And I'm happy to let you know that we have brought to the fore a lot of ancient games that are quite unknown to most of the people that I've listed there. Apart from this, like Arunima mentioned, we also have a space that is dedicated for people to just come and engage with the games and have those simple joys of coming together and staying together. And we've had all age groups of people come in, because the belief is that not just for children, it is for elders too, that we have these games that we conduct. And we have taken the games to all kinds of spaces, educational institutions, community spaces, to educate people about our ancient games. And this is something very beautiful that we've been doing in the last 4 years. The installations that we've done across the different kinds of areas. I'd like to quickly show you, if we can, I'll show you later. We've installed games in parks, in resorts, in public spaces. This is an flyover. Under the flyover, it was just lying waste. So we've created this nice gaming area within Bangalore where people can just walk in and play some of these games. And it has been a huge, huge success. Our latest project has been installing game boards at the Jakkur lake, around the lake. So while you're taking a walk, you can quickly sit down at some of our game boards and have a little game or two. And we also have in the pipeline a lot of projects. Something that's very close to my heart, and we were this close to finishing it, is the Ancient Games Museum, which has got paused with because of the COVID, and a lot of other work that has been happening. And what is in the prototype state is the DIY Mokshapatam kits that we'd love children to take up as an Indian game and DIY kit for days to come. And people usually ask me, from where do we get information? And the world is huge. The people are there. There are so many people who are willing to share their knowledge with us. And that's from where we've been sharing with people, bringing out new games and sharing with the people that. Thank you. If you'd like to see, I can show you some of the installations we've done, but if we're running short of time, that's all right too.
I would just like to say one thing here. India is not a young country. Maybe the name India is young, but Bharata is a very, very, very ancient, old country.
Yes. Definitely. It's been very enjoyable, very deeply satisfying staying in this space of ancient games for me. We've, in the last 1.5 hours, I think we've all seen how they're representative of many aspects of our nature and culture, right? Our cultures and traditions, for me, they're like living ecosystems. It is changing, it is growing. And it is so beautiful. We don't want to let go of those indigenous cultures and tradition. I hope we can all not given to this rapid homogenization of cultures, lose that centuries of accumulated knowledge, but develop that respect. Be proud of, let us sustain that diversity and bring back the enrichment is what I'd like to say.
Thank you so much. It has been a thoroughly enjoyable session. All this while I was thinking which game should I first get my hands on. Also, it's because, as Akka just said, it's not just about fun. There's so much of values that we learn, be it personal development, be it about team building, be it about strategy, all of those things in such a packed manner, And I think that gaming culture is shifting very much towards technology driven or video games, and that's something where we need to come back to our own heritage, come back to our roots, and see this is also a form of community bonding, especially when we are all in this lockdown time. We're stuck at home, we want to find more ways of recreation, spend more time with the family. I think board games are one of the best ways to do that right now. Thank you so much, Rohan. Thank you so much, Sreeranjini. And what's also interesting is both of you are seas apart, but have brought this together. You've stitched it so well together, and that's commendable. Thank you so much. We really had fun, and we look forward to working with you again. Yes, thank you so much. I'll announce the evening session. We will come to an end with today's evening. We have a concluding session, which is India's Global Connect. We are featuring policymakers, instrumentalists, musicians, academics who have organically built a connection with India, and we'd like them to share their experiences. Please do join in. We will be graced by Sri Vinay Sahasrabudhe and President of ICCR, and Dr. H.R. Nagendra, who's the Chancellor of S. Vyasa University. Both of them are partners for this festival. And before that, we have a session called Traversing Dimension, where we are looking at experiential tourism. We've been spoken about so many experiences that India has, and experiential tourism will bring all of that together. So just a glimpse into what it is like. Please do join in, and we see you in the evening. Namaste. Thank you so much.